Hello, my name's James Kelly, and I'm the host for this very first A Course of Love online conference, and it's called Open Your Mind to the Wisdom of Your Heart. And I'm joined here tonight with Mari Perron. Thank you, Mari, for joining me.
Thank you, James.
And our topic for our dialogue is hearing the call. And we're going to make that relevant to you, hearing your call in your life. And Mari's going to give examples of her call, and we're going to discuss that. And so I'm very pleased that these are, what you're watching now is one of the first videos of this conference. You'll probably be watching it on the first day. And so this is really the beginning of the conference. And we're delighted to be having this first A Course of Love conference.
Yeah, it's our first one anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah. And James, first, I really want to thank you for conceiving of this idea. And especially, I know you know this, but listeners will not know that you came up with the idea in order to celebrate the inception of the receiving of A Course of Love. It'll be 20 years, the weekend of our conference. So that really touched my heart. And you have touched my heart, and that makes doing what we're doing just a real pleasure. So, thank you.
Thank you.
It's all about relationship. That's what I say all the time. It's all about relationship.
Yes. Okay. So shall we get into hearing the call? And would you like to say something about that in your experience?
Well, actually, I'd like to talk to you a little bit first because I love stories, as you know, and I thought it was such perfect timing that you felt the call to do this conference at this time that, Course of Love is getting a little bit more known, but, we met in February, and since that time, you've really made a move. And I wanted you to just tell a little bit about what you've done recently with your call.
Yeah. And as you say, when we met in San Francisco in February at the start of the year, it became obvious to me during those days that we spent together at the conference that there was a life purpose, I could call it even that, within myself. It became known to me that was a real surprise. And a lot of that was about, being a bridge between A Course of Love and A Course in Miracles. And because before I came to the conference, it was more like, oh, I've fallen in love with A Course of Love. And it's kind of like maybe I've moved away from A Course in Miracles. But no, it was really clear for me, okay, that was an inner calling, that some part of my life purpose is to be that bridge, or to play a part in being that bridge. So it was like a deep sense of knowing, and also it took me by surprise. I didn't come up with it.
Well, you just said two key things. It's a felt knowing. I mean, it's not logical, maybe, when you have a calling, but you feel it and you feel drawn to it, and it's a surprise. And I've always said that the main thing to me about a calling is you didn't think it up. It's like you can't think a call into being. If you've thought it into being, it's not a call. It's it has that quality of coming to you. And I want you to know, one of the things that I realized just in beginning with this conference, and this is our first one, but we've kind of thought about what we're going to speak of, and is how interwoven everything is. It's like you can't have a calling, or you're not going to experience a calling if you aren't receptive. So you've got, it all goes together. We're going to talk later about receptivity, but it goes with being called. And then a call isn't just a monologue, it's a dialogue. So you have that need to express, so it all just works together. And that really has kind of thrilled me as I begin this it's a new thing for me to be so involved in an online conference. But I love what it's already shown me, interwovenness. I just love that. And another thing that I thought of, really very much because of us coming together, was how really a calling, I think probably, and I can't say this for sure, it's a new thought, but it's a leap into form. So it's like one thing to have the idea. Like you had the idea, and now it's coming into form. You moved it from an idea to form very quickly, and that's a whole different set of talents and skills and everything sometimes to do that. And for me, it's like receiving A Course of Love and then the whole process of getting it out. It's like it has that. I really think callings may have that connotation of they don't just stay here.
Okay.
You bring them into the world, I mean, not that I didn't know that with A Course of Love, but I hadn't thought about it so explicitly. And it's like, and it really sort of came to me. It's like a leap. It's like a leap into form. Like you have the idea, and then, wow, everything changes when you leap into bringing it into form.
Yeah. I'm just checking my sound here, but I'll maybe change a little bit if it sounds echoey. But yeah, it was almost like I knew that action was needed, and I just got on with it. It didn't feel like a big deal. And it only actually was when someone sent an email to me, one of the speakers of the conference was saying, you've taken on rather an ambitious project. I read that and I thought, oh, is that what it is? An ambitious project? It never came to mind that there was anything ambitious about it or a big thing. It was just like, okay, this is what I need to do, and this is the steps. And it wasn't so much like, oh, this is too much or anything like that. Or, I haven't really done it before, and how's it going to work out? It was just really, okay, so this is what you need to do, and you follow, and then the next thing comes up. And there's a sense of being in a flow most of the time. Yeah. So sometimes I see a lot of emails and I go, okay, well, how am I going to organize that? But still, it's more of it. That's the learning for me, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And it's kind of what I mean by it's all about relationship because of the way I feel sort of an affinity with you. It feels like it will be, even though it's work, on both of our ends in some sense, it feels like it will be fun. It'll be like this process of discovery, which I think and feel is so crucial to really getting in touch with your calling and your response and everything, to have opportunities to be in relationship where you can talk about, with somebody who gets you.
Yes.
And so I hope, that for the listening audience that, they might feel some of that between us going out to them.
It's a beautiful way to put it. The relationship. I'm just changing my microphone. Because what took me really in a beautiful surprise was, your response to it. And I was thinking, oh, well, Mari's really up to this. And she is very engaging, and you're answering really quickly, different things. And it felt very engaged from your side. And I thought, this is beautiful. This is easy. Because I remember when we first started, you said something about it sometimes takes you quite a while to make decisions and things like that. And then I thought, wow, Mari's moving really fast.
It's relationship, I mean, really, I do think you feel something. You feel something with certain situations or certain people that make the decision-making process almost mute. That's like a part of a calling. If you hesitate too much, if you're really unsure, maybe it's not, So I think it's all part of the same thing in a way.
Wow.
Yeah. I haven't done a lot of these things, and often I get nervous or something, but I feel quite calm and receptive with you. So we're good. Yeah. But in general, one of the things that has happened in my life, and I think might be common to some other people, is a call taking a long time. Like, I think you might be sort of an exception that you felt it and everything's happening so fast, and it's like my first inclination that something was going to be coming to me. I feel like everything was sort of hesitant or hushed, it wasn't like a ding, 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 it was something's coming, but I don't know what it is. It was that way for, almost a gestation period, like it was 8 months or something between when I had the call that made me feel like I had to leave my job, as you've so recently done with yours, to the time when I knew why I had left my job. And I felt like it was because I was being called to work for God, but I didn't know what that was. And so I also want to speak here to those who feel a vague sense of calling, because it's not always going to be so clear. Like the decision-making process is not always so clear for me. And I think that sort of being able to hang out with that time of a call becoming clear, I really experienced it as pretty difficult. So I think it's kind of a hard time for people when you feel called to something, but you don't know what it is. That is not easy. It's not an easy time. And what I would, suggest, which I did and was familiar with doing, was really paying a lot of attention to, dreams, signs. This is all part of callings. Even in A Course of Love, it talks about it, that there are these different, in fact, I'll just mention that it talks about the call that is an announcement. So that's the big call. So you've had a big call. Doesn't mean you won't have more in the future, but you had a big call. You had an announcing call, and so did I with A Course of Love. And then there's calls that come as signs, and Jesus gives a few examples of that. And then the other one is, I'm not sure if I can remember the term he gives it, but it's sort of being called out, when someone calls you out, and says, hey, looks to me like, or whatever, then they seem as coming demands, and so there's these different ways that things come. And so much of the past has been about a very prescribed way of saying, this is what it looks like, if this is what a call looks like. And so you think, well, if it doesn't look like that, it must not be a call, so I really encourage people, if you just even have that little growing inkling sense of being called, let it grow. It will grow,
Wow. And so when you were having a call for A Course of Love, I think that's like an announcement. And you had some hesitation, you said, around that. And so if there were some dreams, and tell us a little bit more about the story of how it worked. We're talking now about 1997, would it be, just before December 98, or the start of
yes. I had the dream. I should have my records out here. But I had, yes, 1997, when I had the dream that told me I could no longer sell my mind for money. My mind belonged to God. And I knew it was a prophetic dream, but it was a vague dream in a sense. It was like I felt like it was saying, if I left my job, some work for God might be coming to me. But I had a great job, which everyone will hear about if you tune in to me talking with Mary Love and Julianne Carver about our spiritual relationship that developed right where I worked. So, why would I want to leave that job? And I might not have ever left it, except that an inability to do my work came over me. And I wasn't going to talk about that one time with an interviewer, and he said, "Oh, this is a common thing, that you become incapable. So yes, talk about it, And so it may be something that happens with other people where you just become, even if you liked your job, suddenly it's like, man, I can't do this anymore. There's something that makes it feel so different. And so when that happened, I talked to my husband about leaving my job, and my friends and I had just published our first books, the Grace Trilogy, which we'll also be talking about here. And so just in my private life, I was not a person with money, okay, and a very sort of lower middle class family here. And so I didn't approach my husband that I thought I was going to work for God, I said, I thought with my first books being published, it would be a great time for me to really devote myself to writing. And he agreed. So at the end of 1997, I gave my notice. And 3 months later, I entered the next phase of my life, which was another 8 months of waiting on God. So,
Wow.
Yeah.
And the dream of I no longer want to sell my mind for money, was it something like that? Was it for you? How did that really hit you? Because it sounds quite a strong thing to say that you can no longer sell your mind for money. Were you kind of aware that that's what you were doing? I know you had a wonderful job, but was there still a part of you was selling your mind or your time for money?
Well, it could have related, somewhat to when I couldn't do my job, when I started having trouble with my job, it was something new had come into it. That was true. There was a new piece of it that really, because when you do the same thing over and over, at a job, it's like you can almost do it in your sleep. And so my friends and I had a lot of time on breaks and stuff to talk. And then there was a little bit more of a busy time right before I left. But I think that message was much bigger, and I saw it really narrowly until I began doing this review that we'll be talking about also of my past 20 years, that I began to see that what I took the dream to mean was that if I left my job, then some work God wanted me to do would come my way. So it was all about work. In my mind, it became all about work, and it wasn't about don't sell your mind for money anymore. So I almost forgot about that. It was like I was out in the world after I left my job looking for my new work. I went to see my priest, because where do you look for your work for God, and I also wrote a lot because all my life I'd wanted to be a writer. And I think that's a big part of callings too, that we should, that our talents are a given, so really a calling, it's almost like you were born with it, but you grow into it or something. So if you have a talent for music or art or writing or science or whatever it is, that's probably going to be coming into your calling, because if Jesus had asked me to sing, he'd be out of luck. You know what I mean? So I wish I could sing. I really wish I could sing.
Yeah, I like that you're saying about talents. It's like there's something that's been given already, and maybe through our life of doing the necessary things that we think are necessary, somehow we're lost touch with that talent. And then I guess our heart still knows about it, But then the calling we're talking about is almost like reawakening or becoming aware again of sometimes that talent that's there that maybe has been waiting, as you say, or undeveloped.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah. It's like, even me knowing, all my life I wanted to be a writer, it's like it had to wait for the right time. And then it shifted when this call came to, a different kind of writing. But something in you, I believe, kind of has a sense of your call. You might have lost that sense and denied it because you think it's impossible. And so there's a reawakening. And this is one of my favorite things about A Course of Love is in this reawakening of our humanity. There's a reawakening not of like an egoic past, of the, the difficulties or whatever in that way. It's a different kind of an opening. It's a heart opening to the past. That I believe you begin to get in touch with maybe what your dreams once were that you haven't thought of in a while. And the way I have seen people like yourself, kind of volunteer and rise to be of assistance with the course, I think is like that you feel strongly enough about something again. It's almost like in our world where everything is sort of prescribed. You go to work and you go to meetings and you go to classes and you do this and you do that. To have the inner spaciousness, to have something arise and say, hey, I want to be involved in this. Hey, this speaks to me. I want to do something. So there's a real aspect of the heart calling us to what we've ignored, I think. Many of us.
Yeah. It'd be good to say some more things about, for me anyway, about the heart, so my heart is hearing the calling, I guess. It's not like somehow I'm hearing it with my usual sense of my ears or even my eyes. It could be, I guess, but there's part of my heart being involved. It's like my heart already knows.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like listening to my heart, I guess.
Well, both of our courses talk about memory. That there's like, if we just remembered who we were, it's like the ego. Yeah, I haven't read a lot of A Course in Miracles in a long time, but the way I remember it, it's sort of like the ego's paid in A Course in Miracles. Jesus talks about it. It took over part of your mind, and if you can kind of kick it out of that part of your mind, you can see everything differently, And so I think that what A Course of Love came to do is to help those who were ready, but almost like you can't change your mind with your mind, maybe, so we needed this other organ of perception. We needed this to be in touch again with the way that we do actually know the truth, because I have experienced this and I have had Jesus confirm it, that we feel the truth. We feel the truth. It's not a truth if you don't have a feeling associated with it. Like it might be words in your mind, but if it doesn't strike you as a feeling truth, it's probably not the truth. It might be information that's true. So it might be knowledge that's true. But when it is the truth, it hits you. You might get tears in your eyes. You might get goosebumps. It's like something. And it's like until we feel that, we don't really know the difference. But once you know the difference. And Jesus also said you never have that feeling about an untruth. So it's a way to kind of know the difference, because an untruth can't touch you, So.
Yeah. So it's a sense of knowing it's real, or knowing you're really in connection with that calling through the feeling sense. And Yeah, but talk to me more about this, feeling it with your heart. I mean, the heart being like the center of our being, or how does the calling and the heart, and how does that all work? Is it hard to put into words, really? I guess.
Mm. Well, I'm not sure I can describe it too much better than I have, because except maybe that feeling becomes more heightened. Feeling becomes a way of knowing. Like receptivity is a way of listening, but you might call it a heightened way of listening. And you might call that heightened way of listening a way of listening with the heart. So you could almost say that about anything. Like if you are playing music and suddenly it's heightened, you are more inspired, you are more drawn, you are more creative, you are more original. It's like that sort of a feeling. And I am so glad that Jesus talks so much about creativity and expressing ourselves, because it goes together. If you don't feel that welling up of creativity, if you're trying to do what the authorities have told you to do, if you're trying to study as some teacher has told you to study, if you're denying what you feel as you read those words because somebody else told you this is the correct way, that truth doesn't have that chance to touch your heart. So it's kind of being like a sponge, a sponge in a different way, not to the stimulus of the mind, but to the stimulus that you can begin to recognize very quickly if you even just sort of allow for the possibility that your heart is also an organ of cognition. Your heart does actually know. It's not just a pumping blood thing. I can't talk science, but it's scientifically proven now. It's also an organ of cognition and a very deep cognition. So maybe that's awakened, by the experience of A Course of Love, especially if you can actually allow the relationship with Jesus, which is something I'm always kind of surprised to hear people say they didn't really take up, like a personal Jesus. And of course, now I was raised a Catholic and Jesus was always very personal to me. So that was like a natural fit. It was personal. It was always personal. It wasn't some disembodied voice giving me something for the world that didn't move through me, that didn't touch me as it moved through me, that didn't make me feel like, there's people say they feel the presence of Jesus, sometimes. And it was like I was inhabited, it was like this indwelling. But these are words of our religious traditions, to feel the indwelling, so that you're not two separate beings, to feel that indwelling of Christ. And
Yeah. When you talk about that, it just reminds me of my childhood growing up in a traditional Protestant upbringing. And I remember times when I would take myself off and, invite Jesus into my life and want to live like Jesus. And, the desire was there from a very early age. And, so it was kind of personal. But I get surprised then when I read A Course in Miracles and A Course of Love that, Jesus is asking for a personal relationship. And part of me goes, oh, well, hopefully it's not the personal relationship of Jesus in my upbringing, that it's somehow a different way he's asking it from me, I feel now. But I'm tempted to try and skip that process and not really hear that is part of the journey.
yeah, I mean, in certain company, just talking about Jesus is kind of weird, because you have so many concepts of Jesus and so many different takes. And but I think some of the ways that, people hear a calling kind of relate in a sense to the way sometimes that you grew up. Like in the Catholic religion, we heard about vocation even as children. And so, of course, they were very interested in boys wanting to be priests and girls wanting to be nuns. And they would say, through the grace of God, you will receive this vocation. And they would include, being a mother and a nurse and a teacher, things like that. And then there was also sort of this feeling of, and God will give you the grace to survive it, whatever it is. It's like, this is, I think I've had this sense of a vocation, which actually means, do you know what it means? It means summons. It means something like being impelled. That's the meaning of vocation. And so, vocation and callings, that's, an interesting part of all this, because A Course of Love does call us to do. And I remember feeling kind of frustrated in the first book of the Course that it was kind of, there's really nothing to do. He wasn't giving us new tools. He wasn't giving us new exercises, all of those things. And, then you realize you've been kind of a doer, in your way. And then we get to callings, and he's inviting us to participate. He's inviting us to have something he's telling us you have something to give. And it's like, I actually have a Jesus message that I found in my review about callings. Would you like me to read it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah? Okay. It's not very long, but I asked him, I said, aren't callings just knowings? That was my question.
Mm.
Okay. And he said, so this, just to back up, because people might be a little bit surprised that I continued to talk to Jesus, but I did. And I didn't speak with Jesus until the first book of the Course was done. I never spoke to him personally at all. It wasn't like I was, having these conversations with Jesus before A Course of Love began. It was not. So after A Course of Love was done, it was right at the end of the year of 1998. So I began it on, anyway, that doesn't matter at the moment. But I wrote to Jesus personally for the first time. And the first day I didn't get a response. And then I wrote a little more the second day. And the second day I got a response. And then, not so much during the receiving of A Course of Love, because that was very intense and very quick, 3 books in 3 years. But afterwards, especially when I was troubled, I would write to Jesus. And so we began having these conversations, and he was very helpful to me. So we had a very personal relationship. And so I asked him, aren't callings just knowings? And he says, sure. Usually a knowing that is considered hard to accept. But how can I do that? Then the denial or the struggle begins, even though the knowing is there. As you have found with these words that moved through you, they didn't pass through without effect. The effect, like the knowing, is there. You are left to explore it, realize it, make it real, live it, or deny it. These are the simple choices, accept or deny. It goes on a little bit, but I don't want to do too much reading, but that's it. There, it's like in that, you feel it, okay? So you take this course and you feel it, you feel something, and then you are left to explore it, realize it, make it real, live it, or deny it.
Oh, wow. And that bit about denying is quite interesting, because I guess a lot of people have doubts that come in. They hear a calling, and then afterwards they start to doubt it. And I know in the Course of Love it's talked about as well. that doubt rather than certainty. It starts off as certainty, really clear about this calling, and then doubts come in. And I'm kind of curious for you, receiving the calling and following that way back in 97, 98. I mean, was there a period of doubting that happened for you?
Well, there was a definite going crazy period before I knew what my call was.
Yeah,
it's like,
okay.
I'm not hearing from her or anything. I'm just saying, hey, Jesus, I left my job. We're broke. My husband lost his job right after I left mine, which, the funny thing is, when you look back, it's like, if he had lost his job 2 weeks earlier, I would never have left mine.
Never done it.
So,
Okay.
And I didn't understand, why and what's my work for God. And I was trying to write because I wanted to be a writer. Well, I was really cool with writing something about spirituality. Okay, about spirituality. But it wasn't any good writing. I knew that. You know that when you're a writer. And it was very frustrating. And several times along the way, because it's been a long time of A Course of Love gaining acceptance. And I cried many times, and yeah.
So that's a good reminder. So you had the message, no longer sell your mind for money, but then there was this long period of 6 months or so. So was that the start of the calling, and then or this calling took quite a while, or how do you look at it?
I mean, that was the start, and then I had little signs. A lot of them were from going to church, because I thought that was a good thing to do. Sometimes you start out that way, like, well, it would be a good thing to do to go to church, But I did have a wonderful parish priest, and was often inspired by sermons and things like that. And I was inspired by nature. I saw signs and things, so that maybe kept me going a little bit. But I didn't, I don't know, how much more I could have gone on. And it's happened, a couple of times when I got to that place where I didn't know how much further I could go on. I was sort of rescued. And I can think of 2 times I was rescued by my spiritual companion, Mary Love. And so she is the one who rescued me from this. I was thinking, we were so broke, and it was Christmas time, or, coming on to Christmas time. And I thought, I am going to have to go get a job. And I even did go and apply for one job. It was so funny. It was at a company a friend of my husband's owned, and he said, oh, she can come in and make these angels. It was perfect for me, making angels. So it was assembling these glass angels. And just thinking about it. For one thing, I was very bad, but it was like this cement floored building, and you were soldering these little things, and I would make $10 an hour, and I could do it from home, and blah blah blah, and I came home. I was like, my husband could tell the minute I walked in the door. He said, I knew I should have stopped you. I knew that wasn't right for you. I was probably crying or something, but what I really felt was that I would be almost selling my soul, even if I wasn't using my mind, because I knew I was supposed to be doing something else. So right after that, my friend Mary comes over for coffee. It was November 25th, her birthday. We'll, I'm sure, be talking about this too, and she told me that she'd had a dream of a new Course in Miracles. And I had been reading A Course in Miracles nonstop for 2 years. I loved A Course in Miracles. It was like nothing else I'd ever read or experienced. And so that was the beginning of knowing what I was called to. And A Course of Love started a week later. But she has come to my rescue. So I am very, very big on relationship, because I feel that we do when we are in relationships of communion, companionship, oneness, whatever you want to call it, or union and relationship, that's what Jesus calls it for most of the Course. And it's like, it's a new way of knowing. And I've experienced it so many times, mainly with Mary, but also with a few others, where you have the same idea, you have the same insight, you have the same urge in a certain direction. And when you share that with each other, it gives you strength, it grows, and you feel able to go on. And so those of you who are listening and have good friends who you are sharing this with, I mean, this is just a rich, rich ground that Jesus encourages so much, to be in union and relationship. Your friends who know you can give you so much grace and so much, even just letting yourself talk. You know, when you can't talk, I mean, you may only have a few people in your life where you can talk deeply with about spirituality. And so to have someone that you can talk with and share with and hear the other side of things, I think is crucial. And even more so, I mean, the more that time has gone on, I realize it's like, and I will have to talk about this later because it's so hard to find the right language for it, but how much union and relationship is key and what it means. It's like, what's going on here is not just you and me talking, and what's going on isn't just the listener. There is something created through union and relationship. And this is the realm. It's like there is something that exists here that is so real and so magnificent and so part of us and part of each other. And we are, I believe, going to be getting more and more in touch with that.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, what you're saying really is so important for me to learn that and let that in. Because sometimes when I think about calling and I'm imagining your period of time between your first sense of the calling and almost, you know, getting rescued, it's almost like for me, I'm thinking of calling as I go way inside myself to this deep, quiet space in my little cave. But you're saying, well, no, it's about relationships that are happening with your friends and those people around you. So that's part of really hearing the full calling, I guess, is it's happening in a relationship with other people.
James, you know, I've also spent years in solitude. And you talked about the cave. I had a whole cave experience. So, but I always had at least one or two friends that I could touch in with. You know, even so I mean, people laugh at me, you know, when I say things like, well, I very rarely get in my car more than once a week. You know, I mean, I eat peanut butter sandwiches every day because I don't have to go to grocery shopping, you know, I mean, but I love peanut butter sandwiches. But I mean, it's like you become sort of a hermit in a sense, but if you have your touchstones and you have your way of also giving your voice to the world, it can be just a very intimate journey, you know, even when you're sharing publicly. You know, it's like I don't have any sense of, you know, being a performer or an expert or anything like that. I'm just sharing. And so this is intimacy is really key, I think, to keep it intimate and not, you know, our whole lives are public and kind of prescribed almost. You know, there are ways of doing things, and but where you can find intimacy, you can really begin to open up and to let in.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Somehow there's a question sitting with me here that some people might have it as well. As like, so how come it took all those months? I mean, you know, for the calling mostly to know what it really was about. I mean, was there some resistance there, or is that what were you learning apart from obviously staying in relationship and intimacy? But was there what was looking back on it, or just what's it like, that time? What was it for?
Well, I sometimes feel, because I hear so many people talking about hitting some kind of a bottom before their major uprising happens. I sometimes think that, or feel that, because I really thought I was trying everything, but that might be it too. The trying, is like, okay, here I am. I'm ready to work for God. What is it? Okay, it's not that. It's not that. I'll keep writing. I'll keep trying to write a really good spiritual book. Could have been all those things. But, you combine it with, we were so broke, and you combine it with that, and I feel almost like there was sometimes there may be a relinquishment, and I think people fear that, so I don't like to talk about it, but sometimes you might have to give up. It's like you might have to, if you really want to follow a calling, you might have to give up a job before you are really comfortable financially doing so, when you kind of have to make a choice. And really, a calling ends up being a choice you have to make and a commitment that you make. Like, even, but the nice thing is about that is that when you're called, you are not going to let anybody else tell you, no, that isn't it, that isn't the way, etc., etc. It doesn't mean you're going to tell them, oh, this is the right way. No, it doesn't mean that. But you're not going to let them tell you the way, because a call brings absolute conviction. And that could be one of the reasons, you are taken to your point of absolute conviction, sometimes in a way that doesn't feel kind, but,
Yeah, I love that about, I sense that within myself, there's an absolute conviction about a calling, and no one could put me off, no matter how crazy they thought I was, or, really, do you want to give up as you mentioned there, I gave up my profession, my veterinary profession about 2 weeks ago, are you crazy doing that? And it was just so clear for me to do that, there's just a conviction, as you say, and then and then the ride from there to the calling happening, I guess be interesting journey.
All the elements coming together, which feels to me, every time I have a relationship such as ours come into my life, it feels like another element, another page of this that's moving us into the future. But I wanted to tell you, when you said that about your veterinary practice, I just always remembered this. My mom was like, "You're giving up your good university job with your benefits?" And she lamented that pretty much the rest of her life. You could have had those good benefits. With healthcare as crazy as it's become in the United States, it's like,
yes,
never giving up that job.
Yes. Putting your whole complete trust and on a calling that seems crazy to the world and a lot of people. I guess that's kind of part of it, maybe.
Or amorphous. Almost every time that there's a question and answer when I talk, there are people who talk about wanting an amorphous calling. It's like, it's one thing if you know what you want to do, like you do, but when that call is unformed,
Okay.
And that's kind of like mine was too. Mine was sort of, can't sell your mind for money. What does this mean? It was an unformed. The only form I could give it was the writing form. And So, but people, want to be an artist, or they want, it's often, sort of sensitive, creative people who they really want to um, give in a new way, live their lives in a new way, but they don't know exactly what's calling. And that, like I said, I think that's the hardest time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it doesn't mean it isn't there. It just means it's not there yet.
Yeah, I think that's so important because, as you say, a lot of people aren't really clear of what they're called to do, and it's amorphous, and therefore that's much harder than having real clarity about your call. Mm. And you would say to them, just hang on in there, I guess, or there's a certain, but it will become clear, is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I think to keep that just not here yet. And so what they do with their job or their, anything else that they're in, they don't have to feel a pressure. This isn't I mean, I guess it was a pressure for me when I was waiting all that time, but
yeah.
Whichever way you go, whichever way you go, it's, if your heart is true, it will be there in that yet zone. It will come to you. I can't promise it won't break you first. You should cut before that comes. No. But it's just that, and there are so many ways that people are able to fulfill their calling without making real changes, with just bringing their gifts to light.
Yeah. I mean, what that brings up, because I tried about 3 years ago to stop doing veterinary work and go into another business that was created as a hobby. But there was so much fear there that after about 5 months, when there was some financial challenges, I just went back in and started again doing the veterinary work. But when I look at it now, so it was like a process of following a calling 3 years ago. And, I look back on that with gentleness now. I go, well, I needed another 3 years to get to the point where I really knew I was ready. And along those 3 years, there were some bits I was saying, maybe it's not ever going to happen, but there was somehow another part of me that knew it was going to happen one day, where I was just clear completely on the knowing, and it was just so obvious that there was no doubt at all. And but that fear crept in, but that's part of it. I look at it now as part of it. I don't go, oh, I've lost 3 years. I go, well, that was just perfect for me to get to where I am right now.
Exactly. And that word that you used, gentleness.
Gentleness.
Yeah. If we could all be gentle about it, gentle with ourselves about, that time it might take, or that we might decide and then change our minds, certainly does. I beat myself up enough that I know that you don't want to go there if you can at all.
Yes.
Be really gentle with yourself.
Yeah, I think that's a nice message to really end with, is that gentleness, that patience, and I guess there's a sense of openness as well, remaining open to that calling, and just staying with it in an open-hearted way, in a listening way. Mm.
I haven't spoken a single Course of Love quote here, so I want to.
Yes.
This is my favorite one. My favorite one on callings says, the list of different callings could be endless, and each could be considered unexplainable. Those who seek and explanation before following a calling, who look for reasons of a practical nature, who would seek guarantees of the rightness and outcome of following such a call, seek proof they have already been given. And this is my actual favorite part. I thought I'd read the whole paragraph, but this is my favorite. The call itself is proof. It is proof of the heart's ability to be heard, of the heart's ability to recognize the unseen and to imagine the existence of that which will reveal its true nature and its joy. Isn't that beautiful?
I love that. It's just like you follow your heart and it will lead to joy and a sense of your true nature and true self. Yeah, and we can't get all those guarantees. We can't expect all the guarantees at the start. It's just that the call itself is all we need.
It's the proof. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, James. This was a wonderful first interview.
And for those people who join us, we're going to show it in a different sequence, so we'll have others before it, and that's fine. This conference is part of it is recorded at different times, and that's just a wonderful new adventure for us all. And I thank you, Mari. It's just been a pleasure I think for me as well, it's a pleasure to recognize our connection. And part of me sometimes can shy away from honoring that and seeing that, and that's part of this journey, this conference journey for me and for you and for others as well. It's like it's all to do, as you say, with relationships and that heart connection.
Yes. And if we can, we're going to send them over the airwaves.
Yeah.
Because we can. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mari, and this has been a pleasure, and a whole lot of other things as well mixed in, so thank you so much.
Thank you again.
Okay.
I look forward to the rest of our sharing.
Exactly. Me too. Thank you, and bye for now.
Bye.